Hi, my name is Richard Ward, and this is my Baba story. Um, I was always in love with the wonders of nature, and as a very small child, like 3 or 4 years old, I used to drag my mom by the hand out to the backyard, and she had this little golden seal guide to insects, and I wanted to know every single insect and every way that they lived, where all that stuff. And one day I noticed that the detail that I was looking at had detail in it, and that detail had detail in it, smaller and smaller into infinity, and that it also went the other direction, that all the surroundings and the surroundings to those surroundings went infinite. And I blissfully reeled in that for a while. And so nature has been a connection to the infinite, a connection to God, the feeling this wonder all my life. And I sort of connected it with science. So about that same time, I I wanted to be a genius so I could really go after it. And an inner voice told me that's not going to happen. So it didn't happen. So anyway, um, I'll just go back a little bit. I was born in California, in the near Oakland, in Castro Valley, and it's. I was 3 months old when Baba came in 1956, and he did a kind of semicircle around Oakland. He went up to Marin and all that, and he went down to Mountain View and visited Don Stevens' house and all the places in between, Atherton, where Ivy Deuce's house was, and of course San Francisco. So my parents didn't know about him, and I didn't know about him, but it was a close call anyway. Um, so my dad worked for the Federal Aviation Agency, so we moved a lot. So I was in Tucson for a little while, loving the desert museum there, the caves, the Gila monster lizards that are poisonous, the tarantulas with the orange and black stripes, and the desert foxes, the coatimundis, the cactuses, the rocks, the streams. I loved all that stuff. I was so in love with it. Then we moved to Phoenix, and Phoenix was like flat, and it had uh, a irrigation ditch with big trees lining it, believe it or not, and it got to be like 115 at night. And the big thrill for me was there was all these scorpions. Oh, there were beautiful small ones that were very deadly, and big ones that looked pretty awesome. And I studied all that, and I loved that. But the main thing is that uh, we moved then from Phoenix. After a year, we moved to Bakersfield, and then probably after a year, we moved to Palmdale, Lancaster, which is in California, and it's kind of near the Mojave Desert. So there were these Joshua trees and all kinds of horny toad lizards and all this kind of stuff there, and I like that. But being an only child and moving a lot, um, and being so in love with nature, I really didn't relate to kids very much. It was like they wanted to do stuff that I just, it was kind of a waste of time for me. And they also like to do things like sit on me and pinch my face or something. So I just sort of dismissed them as being idiots, and I gave up on them. And that continued in my life, and eventually I found that it was part of a deep pattern in me, that I had a vision of my birth when I was contemplating, and I was born cesarean, and so I had the cord around my neck, and the doctor was very worried that I would, die or have brain damage, and so he, did this cesarean operation. But for me, in the vision, and I don't know how you get such a thing or how it registers, but there was a lot of information. One of them is that I read the doctor's concern for me as criticism, that I was doing everything wrong. And because I could have been maybe near death at that time. It was like ugly. So the sort of word that came out, which is kind of the opposite of a genius, is small, ugly moron. It came out like that. And so I couldn't sit with that. I'm talking about in my life, the vision was showing. So I flipped it onto people, that they're not very smart and they do a bunch of bad stuff. And so I've had to try to overcome that coming to Baba, to realize that that's just an impression, a sanskara, and that people have Baba in them and that they're doing the best they can and they deserve love. So that's something I've worked with. But anyway, when I was like 8 years old or so, we went to the beach, probably Santa Barbara, and I went into the waves and I did some body surfing, and I got caught in this very strong tide, and it took me way up high and it slapped me on the bottom with great force and knocked out all the air out of me and dragged me under. And so I'm spinning underwater, and all of a sudden it was time, and I just breathed in underwater, and I said, "You breathed in underwater, you're dead." So I started feeling like I was sitting beside my body, and I felt this tremendous bliss. I saw the silver cord. I turned away from my body and I started to drift in this incredible blissful state. And then at some point I came conscious and I was walking on the beach. And so that was my first near-death experience, besides the birth or whatever. And so my mom was a poet and she was interested in mystical things. We had gone to the Unitarian Church for a while, and then later we went to the Methodist Church. And I noticed that the kids were not interested really in Jesus or anything spiritual, and also that nobody understood that the word Methodist refers to a method. They didn't know what the method was or who founded it or anything like that. So I was pretty disgusted with that, and I hung out with the adults that had a meditation group there, which eventually conservative people threw out the pastor and everything because he was too liberal. But anyway, there I found out about a college that was alternative college called Evergreen State College, and I eventually went there. And when I was there, I took a course called Autobiographies, and the idea was to write about your life without looking back. Just keep writing and writing and writing. So I did that, and then at a certain point you do look back. And I looked back and I found that I had written about the same episode with a totally different story. It wasn't matching, and I realized I was inconsistent. And I looked around the college and I saw that all the different departments don't even agree with each other about what is the nature of reality and existence and everything. So I realized it was a pretty big deal. And then I went into this spiritual state was very full of unbearable energy, and usually when I talk, people don't agree with me, but everyone agreed with me no matter what I said, and crowds started gathering around me. Scared me. I thought I was going insane. I just wanted to stop. So I did get it to stop, and then a little while later at Evergreen, I realized that my dream of, I always loved biology, but then when I started studying it and they wanted me to dissect things all day, I wasn't interested. It was all pre-med. I wasn't interested in pre-med. So I found the only thing that was interesting was the calculus course, because for the first time in my life I saw math as beautiful. It was about motion, the rate of change, and infinity and all kinds of stuff, and I just loved it. So I had this dream of making a cartoon for Saturday morning that would be about traveling in space, and instead of having the usual, background things like dilithium crystals in Star Trek or whatever like this. This would have talk about, you know, the first and second derivative and acceleration and stuff, but just you didn't have to pay attention, just be in the background. And so by the time kids got to studying calculus, they'd be familiar with the whole thing without any effort to speak of. So I wanted to do that, and so there I was at Evergreen, and I studied filmmaking, and I realized that computers and filmmaking were going to merge. It was early times, so I joined a course that was about designing an operating system, sort of like, you know, there's Windows and there's the Mac operating system. It was like our own Mac operating system. And so in order to find out more, we did a research trip down to Silicon Valley, to Palo Alto. Xerox has a research center there called Palo Alto, it's PARC, Palo Alto Research Center anyway. And there was the guy who's responsible for why you guys use computers with icons and so many things, the mouse and all that stuff. He brought that into prominence. His name was Alan Kay. We met him, and I also met at Stanford this professor, Richard Wayrock, who was a very different kind of professor. He was, of course, they were interested in artificial intelligence, which in those days was like creating a set of directions that would generate intelligent behavior, whereas now artificial intelligence is like you expose a photographic plate to 1,000 or 1 billion images, and then you get some kind of behavior. So anyway, back then we were doing that, and so I ended up having an internship with him. But before that happened, no, well, okay, that happened. Okay, so I'm studying with people that are way beyond me. I'm an undergrad. Almost everybody I'm in contact with is a postdoc of a brilliant kind. So they're geniuses and I'm not. We know that. We got that well established. But I loved being with them, and the AI lab was just this incredible place. It was wrapped around a hill. It was made of wood to withstand earthquakes. There were robots wandering the parking lot. You could type on the computer and watch any television station you wanted or hear any radio thing. You could pick your food from the vending machine. It would be Chinese food, like pot stickers or whatever, and it would put on your tab. And there were people from all over the world there, and it was really exciting. Anyway, my teacher had a class called Philosophy and AI, and in the class were people that had their own AI labs. They weren't even postdocs. They were beyond postdocs. And one of the people in the class was the guy that invented the pocket calculator, and he had been in the camps in Germany and had a tattoo on his arm. His name's Egan. Anyway, in that class, my teacher went to the board because he was talking about how do you make an individual? What is the first action of an individual? And so he drew a circle on the blackboard, and he tapped in the circle and he said, self and other. So that is the first act, to create that boundary. And then he said the first other, and then he put an M in front of it, is mother. And that has stayed with me as such an image. Anyway, so I was very interested in logic. I actually, when I was like in first grade, my dad was trying to learn something for work called Boolean algebra, and it was basically, you know, Venn diagrams, union and intersection and all that. And so there I was, like in first grade, learning about logic, you know. And so here I was in Stanford, and I felt really comfortable with it, but I wasn't that good at it. I was just not a genius. It was, you know, what to do. So from there, I got involved with a company called Pacific Data Images. And they are the people that did the movie Shrek and all that kind of stuff. And so I was so close to realizing my dream of being an animator and creating that thing for Saturday morning. But suddenly I was in great pain. My job was to digitize things, which in those days meant I dragged what they call a puck. It's sort of like a mouse with crosshairs and a little window. You drag it around the design and you on a drafting table. And I was in so much pain it felt like I was being branded by hot iron, and it was just burning down the nerves of my arms, and I couldn't sleep. I just grounded my teeth at night, and I wanted to die. And so that kind of interfered with the dream, that part. So anyway, I loved that. I couldn't become an animator. I was just a digitizer. I didn't have the stamina to do all-nighters and all that kind of stuff. I was just a wreck. So there I was, kind of stuck. And the first thing that happened that was positive is one of my friends got married, and through that I got introduced to this relative of his who's, his in-law, who's Thomas Hanna. And he had studied directly with Feldenkrais, and he had developed his own technique a little further than Feldenkrais, which, Feldenkrais also developed his technique more than Alexander and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, this is the only guy that really helped me. It stopped the pain in like 45 minutes. And then I went home, and the pain came back. I was like dry heaving into the toilet, and I called him up and I said, "You've got to help me, it's come back." And he says, "No, just do the exercises I taught you." So I always do the exercises, and it does help. I still have fibromyalgia. I have to walk a tightrope. I have to sit on pillows. I'm sitting on pillows right now. If I sit on a regular chair, I have pain for 3 or 4 days. I have to limit my physical activities, but I'm alive, so it did give me my life back. So after that, I really wanted to expand and grow and become totally healed. So I started to study martial arts. Now, I had become interested in martial arts in like 1971 when this book came out called Zen and the Art of Archery. And I pulled it out of the library, I read it, I wanted to be a monk. That was that. So I went to Pier 1 Imports, I bought a bamboo mat, I took it to the backyard, and I had a little bell and I started meditating. Anyway, nobody knew what the heck I was talking about. So then the next year, Kung Fu came on television, and everybody knew what I was talking about. And but anyway, so probably somewhere a little bit later than that, I started studying Shotokan karate, and then a couple of other things. I had a really great teacher with a spiritual heart for that, but I realized not everybody who studied it had that, and that some people who were very good at it had the opposite. So I realized it wasn't a guarantee of spiritual progress. So then when I went to Evergreen, I started studying Aikido, and Aikido is one of the most directly spiritual martial arts. The founder, who they call O-sensei, or great teacher, Aikido came to him in a spiritual experience when he went to the backyard and there was fountains of light and everything like that, and that's how it came to him. So it's about no fight. It's about going with the person's energy, and it's an amazing thing. So I love that, and one of the things I found, because it's like judo, you throw people and they go through the air and land. One of the things I found while doing that is that every once in a while, when you least suspect it, something weird happens. You throw somebody, and instead of going the normal distance, they go way farther. And there's a kind of tingling feeling. And you can't believe that it happened. And you might, quite often, I did, and other people, accuse the other person of jumping. But they didn't jump. And then when you're on the other end of it and you're thrown and it happens, you just zoom through the air in this weird way. So I didn't know what that was, but I knew that it wasn't normal physics. I knew that was something else. And then when I got to Palo Alto, and I wanted to keep going with the somatic change from Thomas Hanna, and I started studying with this particular teacher, Peter Ralston, who had the Cheng Shen School of Martial Arts. Anyway, the first time I saw him, he scared me because I would like feel a teacher, but intuitively get who they were, and it was like he was gone. He wasn't there. And I realized that he had shattered his ego. And he was an amazing martial artist, the best I've ever studied with. And that was, with him, he also did this thing he called it contemplation intensives. Generally, it's called enlightenment intensives. And that is when I had that vision of my birth doing that. Anyway, after working with him for a while, I was traveling from Palo Alto across the Oakland Bridge, and there was an earthquake. And this is the year that Mara passed. It's 1989. It's about 5 months after she passed. And all the street lights on the bridge are just moving like the legs of a millipede or something like that. And the cars are swinging from one side of the bridge to the other side of the bridge. And you don't know how far that's going to go. And when it stopped, everybody got out of their car. I mean, like at least 90% of the people got out of their car and checked to see if they had a flat tire, which is really quite funny. And but anyway, on the radio, I was listening to commercial radio, and they spoke from their heart, and they spoke the truth because it was an emergency. And I hadn't ever witnessed that before. It was really a beautiful thing. Anyway, so somewhere around there, I had my second spiritual experience. I was working at PDI, and all of a sudden I was in this heightened state with this sort of unbearable energy again, and there were signs from God which I could follow, or I could use my regular thought process. And I followed the signs, and I had all kinds of adventures, and all the holy scriptures and stuff just seemed to fit together, and there was like no enigma anymore. It was just like that. And it kept taking me to things that I didn't like and showing me the wholeness of life and how to accept them and everything like that. And one of the things I did during that time is I straightened out PDI, which had started picking on people because they didn't want to give people raises, and I straightened them out on that, out of that energy. And I think after that they were always a really good place to work for a long time anyway. So come 91, I get spiritually restless, and I heard about a spiritual community in Colorado. So I went there, and it was a little bit too much for me, and after a little while, probably like a year or less, I decided it's time to go back to college. I only have like 2 quarters or something to finish and get my degree. So in going back to college, which was in Washington State, I didn't want to hang out in Olympia where Evergreen State College is. I wanted to live in Seattle because Seattle is really fabulous. And there's also Aikido there and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, when I went back to school, I needed to get, to become a resident. And so I looked up the sister of one of my old college buddies who lived in Green Lake. And she said she would help me find a place. And she said, you think you're like a mental seeker of God, but you're really a bhakti, a heart seeker of God. And why mess around with the footman? Baba is the emperor. And, I really wasn't interested in hearing that because I was interested in like the minimalism of Zen, and I had no interest in Hindu teachings and stuff at that point. And also in the logic that I was studying, it was like, what is the minimum ontological commitment? What is the basics that you can build on the foundations of arithmetic, and every other logical system above that, you know. And so I was kind of hardcore science in some way, but the mysticism of nature was all through me at the same time. And so here's this thing, and I don't know what to do with it, you know. So she shows me a place very close to Green Lake, a block or two away, and it's a house. It has 3 rooms, so 3 people get to stay there. And one of the people there was her friend who was interested in Baba, and there were Baba pictures all around the house. And I thought, this is definitely a cult. It's a cult, you know. And but it's a great place to live, and they don't seem very dangerous, and they don't seem to bug you about it. So I decided to move in. So I moved in there and kind of worked for a period of time until I got residency. And after a little while, my Baba connection and the person in the house who was a Baba lover, they went to Baba's tomb. They went to Mehrabad. And they were gone for some number of weeks. It was probably 4 weeks, 5 weeks, something like that. Anyway, the minute that they left in the plane, I started having this incredible experience, which is that, you know, when you grow up as in a Christian country, you have images of the nativity, and so Christ is born, and there's this star that the wise men follow, right? So that star rose inside of my body. It came from, you know, my abdomen and raised up to the heart level and just shined, and it was 24/7, and I couldn't stop it. It just happened and happened and happened. So all my logic went out the window in terms of arguing. You know, this is just nothing. This is, you know, whatever. You can't argue with 24/7 for weeks and weeks on end. So I knew there was something to Baba, and I knew I was completely out of my league, and I didn't understand anything, and I didn't know what to do. And so when those two came back, eventually they told me, well, why don't you go to the Oregon Sahavas? So I went to the Oregon Sahavas, and I met Bal Kalchuri, Baba's very close and most youngest of those disciples. And they had warned me that when he talks, he's got a heavy accent, and so when he says labor phase, he means labor phase. So I was a little bit able to understand him from the coaching. But anyway, I got one of the famous bow hugs, and he pulled me back afterwards and looked into my eyes and said, "You're coming to visit me in India, aren't you?" And it's like, dub, you know. And then, anyway, I ended up going. So it was probably less than a year. So I'm kind of a very cautious person, but when I set out, it's like I didn't get my vaccinations. I said, I'm on pilgrimage, Baba. If you want me to die, I'll die. And that's how wild it was. And when I went to the tomb the first time, I just rushed in and bowed down, and I said, Baba, thank you so much for bringing and accepting a skeptic like me. But anyway, there's a little bit of a story on the way. So I didn't go with those people that I knew, but a friend of theirs. And he was a lawyer, so I thought he knew how to handle himself. So they were, my Baba contact and her friend were already there. So we get out of the plane in Mumbai, and we get into a taxi, and I think we spent overnight, and then we got into a taxi, and the taxi driver, his eyes were kind of shifty like this, you know, and we thought, uh-oh, you know, this is trouble. And then he keeps driving and driving and driving and driving, and we don't understand that the train station is a very far distance. So we demand that he stops the taxi, because we think he's taking advantage of us, and let us out. Out of the goodness of his heart, he wouldn't stop until he got us to a satellite train station that was for commuters. And so we stopped there, and as soon as we got out of the taxi, all these old men came over and wanted to grab our luggage. And it's like we're holding our luggage like that. And we go to the train, we get on, and it feels not like getting on the bus in the US where it's kind of this not good feeling. It was a beautiful feeling. Everybody's hearts were open. All the Indian men going to work, they were dressed much more beautifully than the people in the US who just sort of wear t-shirts and stuff like that, at least in the tech world. And there was this beggar who didn't have legs, and he was on a little wheel thing, the little wood with wheels, and he would zoom around underneath, and people would give him money. And I looked out the side of the train car, and I saw the slums that I'd been told about since I was very young. You know, eat your vegetables, there are people starving in India. I looked at this gigantic slum, and I saw that these shanties that were made of found objects, they had satellite dishes. I realized I had no idea what they were like, and all my preconceptions about everything were just that. And so it was a long train ride, and we got there, and I spent, well, pretty quickly I noticed Maayan, you know, and but she seemed to always be disappearing every time I noticed her. So anyway, after about a week, I had this experience of Baba, which was that he was constantly walking with me right by my side with his arm around me. And he could tell me what he wanted me to do, or I could follow my idea. So I just followed him. And he told me to stay close to Maayan and to do whatever she was doing. By that time, I had kind of connected with her. So I spent all my time with her. She did samadhi duty at that time, and I would walk with her. And then after samadhi duty was done, quite often we would walk Nanakare down the hill. And that meant we were late for dinner. And by the time we got there, there was hardly anything left. But it was wonderful to walk with Nanakare and to be close with him. I also spent a lot of time with Mansari, and it was just, I mean, I think that people who do these videos can say it's indescribable to connect with these wonderful, close disciples of Baba. And so, anyway, Baba told me that Maayan was the one. And I told her that, and she said, well, Baba may have told you, but he didn't tell me. So I had to wait, and it took a long time. But anyway, that's another story. So we're there, and we spend all this time together, and this experience of Baba next to me and being so intimate didn't stop at night, all night long, all day long. It was absolutely melted me. And so when I left, it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking because I was leaving Baba. That experience stopped. And it was heartbreaking because I was leaving Maayan. And so I came back home, and it was Seattle, and of course it was raining, and it was cold, and I got sick right away, and the amoebic dysentery I got while I was in India came back, and my lips cracked, and I got hemorrhoids, and everything was haywire, and I was completely sad. And I would write these long letters to Maayan of how much I missed her, with little pictures and stuff in it. And it seemed like years, but I guess it was 6 months or something. Anyway, so eventually she um, decided that she had to renew her visa so she would come to the U.S. And she has a story about that. But anyway, uh, when she got here, we kind of connected. It was a little bit tricky at times, and we finally realized how much we cared for each other. And at a little restaurant nearby, she finally proposed to me after, I don't know, 4 or 5 proposals by me. And I just said yes. And so we got married. And at that time, uh, we were developing this way of talking to Baba by collecting a bunch of images from our life, like drawings or postcards or cutting things out of the magazine. And we call it guidance cards, and we wrote a book about it. But anyway, when we finally, we lived in Mike Coffin's old trailer by the beach, and it was really wonderful. But then when we finally decided that we were going to get a house, we used the cards, and this is the house, and we asked Baba about every single square foot and where everything went, and that's what this house is. And I realized quite a lot that my marriage, my house, everything was from Baba. And so the old skeptic, which did come back here and there, which eventually I called the assassin because it likes to, attack and, kill things. It just didn't have much ammunition left. And I've had a really wonderful life with Mayan and being so close to the Meher Baba Center. And it's a continuing journey. One thing that Mayan and I did is we read The Artist's Way, which says to write 3 pages in the morning when you wake up. My fibro doesn't allow that. So I can draw. So I have these little notebooks that each morning I do a little drawing to Baba. And let's see, tilt it up like this. Okay. So, sometimes it's just adoration of Baba. This is Baba and Mira, Sometimes it's pouring out my difficulties to Baba. But anyway, whatever it is, it comes to me. Sometimes I'm trying to learn how to draw Baba better because I tend to make him kind of simplistic. And, here's one where he's helping me when I'm pretty clueless. And this is the kind of thing I do, and it orients my whole day towards Baba, and I love it. And we did do a book of this called Little Efforts, which is based on Darwin Shaw's book, Effort and Grace. So all the chapters and sub-chapters are right from his book in terms of the titles. But then Mayan wrote some things that comes to her each morning when she writes to Baba, and I just do the pictures that come, and we just mix those two to make this book. And we have done a lot of books now. I think it's up to 19 of our own books. We did 2 for my mother's spiritual poetry, and we love the stories, the Baba stories, and collecting them. Some of the people we collected from passed away shortly after, and all of them are such precious gems. And I fell in love with storytelling when I was back at Stanford, and I was such a good storyteller that it was part of the reason Mayan fell in love with me. I told her so when I first met her in India. And so I appreciate the craft of Baba as a screenwriter, as a writer of our lives. It is matchless. And so it always feels so much a wonder in my heart to hear people telling their stories. So with that, I hope that your story just keeps unfolding in the beauty of Baba's love. And that's it, Jai Baba.